legal abuse syndrome is when the legal system is used to your disadvantage. It's manipulated by, or your rights are taken from you on a technicality, or the other side has an attorney that's just really good at finding loopholes. And so you are caught in this system and you're trying to fight, to use the legal system to fight for your rights. And all it's doing is draining your time, your energy, and your money. And you're still losing, even though on paper your rights are there, or you have a valid argument. It's just being used against you, and the system is being used in your to disadvantage you.
Had enough of excessive fines, selective enforcement, and nosy Karens? Welcome to the Association Nightmares podcast. If you're tired of being pushed around by your HOA or condo association, you've come to the right place. Property owners, get ready to take back your power. And now, here are your hosts, Ann and Mark.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, Dr. Amanda Dutton, who holds a PhD in comparative studies, will be joining us. Her related disciplines of focus include, but are not limited to, political and religious rhetoric, the psychology of power and socio-personal power structures, and political history and philosophy. She's experienced and observed the horrible behaviors exhibited by abusive HOAs and has made it her mission to educate the public on the history of the social institution, the ways in which it's meant to work, the ways it can be abused, and how people can arm themselves with knowledge of their rights and the law so that they can fight the abuse. Dr. Amanda is a member of the HOA Reform Leaders National Group and co-chaired the Georgia Legislative Committee of that group for a time. Independently, she started Resident Evil HOA Lectures, LLC, to further the cause of all American homeowners, encouraging them with the motto, democracy starts at home. Let's welcome Amanda to the podcast. So nice to see you again, Amanda.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, we love having you. Mark and I were just talking about how your resume is just so perfect for this topic. So perfect.
Well, it's interesting because academics, basically what we do is we use what we know and what we've learned and say, how can I apply this to a situation? And so I'm happy to, yes, I agree. There's a lot of things that line up, and there's a lot of interests that I have that also line up to what's going on. And if it helps me help people, that makes me very happy.
No, I think you definitely can. I think your background can help people. And this is a topic that I was just telling Mark. This is happening. I live in a condominium, and I'm watching the board in real time actually abuse members by using their powers of the purse and whatever. And this happens every day. Mark and I get emails and phone calls every day about the abuses in HOAs and common interest communities.
Yeah, I do too. I get so many people that reach out to me thinking that I can help. And I always say it's unfortunate that I didn't go into law because I do not have the energy to get a JD, because there aren't any lawyers that are willing to help people. Or if they do, they say, I'll give it a shot, and it costs tens of thousands of dollars. And people aren't in a position to do that. And the fact that you have to do that to defend what's on paper, your rights, is incomprehensible to me. So that's right. What started this whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I just had a conversation in our homeowners community online group where some of the members are talking about hiring an attorney to go after the developer. And it doesn't affect me and our home, but it affects other homes in the neighborhood. And I said, this is an $18 billion a year company with $2 billion in profits every year. It's like, you have to consider that before you decide to threaten litigation, because every homeowner in the neighborhood, it's 80 homes. It's like, I'm sorry, we don't have the resources that they have, and they can slap you around if they want to legally.
Yeah, literally and figuratively.
So Amanda, tell us first of all how you got into being interested in the abuses that are prevalent in common interest communities.
Well, my story is that my whole life I lived in homes that did not have HOAs. I'd heard of them and I had heard not good things about them, but there was always we didn't have that in our life. Well, we moved to Georgia for my job, and we were looking for homes, and you could not find anything in the area that was not part of something. And we found a house, and this was also during uh, the melee of house shopping. So in 2022, so there was very little inventory, and so we found one that had a very low. It said it had an HOA, had a very low yearly fee, and so forth. I was like, well, we have to at this point. So we closed the deal, but it turns out that it's not an HOA. It actually is a recreation association that's acting as an HOA. It has no control over our property, and not everybody in the neighborhood is part of this group. But what they're doing is they're forcing people who have signed up, some people unknowingly, from what I've heard of neighbors, that once you sign on to this pool membership, they force you to be part of it forever, and anyone who buys your house is stuck. So they made it clear on their website that they're intending to take over the whole neighborhood and turn it into an HOA, but they have not been successful in 25 years. But again, and this goes against Georgia code, you can find it in the statutes that they cannot enforce mandatory membership unless every house in the neighborhood is part of the group, but they don't care. And they know that they have the attorneys to fight it, the purse to fight it, and they'll just bleed people dry. So that agitated me enough that I was like, all right, let's look at this. And so I started doing research. What are my rights? What are the legalities? And I just dug further and further and further. And I realized quickly how many people are in what is known as HOA hell. And of course, my sense of justice and fairness was really outraged. And so I just dug in and started researching, and I started sharing information with people. I started Resident Evil HOA lectures as basically it was going to be a book or a paper, then a book, and then it turned into this website where I'm posting information as fast as I can, as much as I can, to try to help people. So that's the long story, hopefully short.
So let me get a little clarification on this. So this was a private recreational facility that was embedded inside a community. Is that what they were? And so they had
Yes.
nothing to do with the homes.
No, it was something where it was a pool and tennis at one side of the development. And when it first started, it was created by a developer. And when it first started, it was a non-mandatory group. And sometime and this was in the 70s, sometime in the 90s, some neighbors got together and thought it would be a good idea to get an HOA together. And not everybody signed on. And so they had to form a recreation association instead. So they've been carrying on, but the interesting thing is their current bylaws, to my knowledge, if they have the right bylaws posted, actually has options for membership, but they simply over the years said, you know what, we're not offering that anymore. And you're stuck.
Interesting.
Hmm.
It's like going backwards.
Yeah. It is. It's extortion because I actually had an attorney look into it. And she sent a demand letter, and their attorney called her and said, well, if we let one person go, then we'd have an exodus of membership. So to me, that was a huge red flag saying that, wow, they have trapped all these people. And of course, you have to be careful because my lawyer did warn me that if they decided to just start fining me for bad behavior or even make up fines, say I was at the pool doing something, even though I wasn't, they in Georgia for $2,000 worth of fines, they can lien your house and take it from you.
Yeah, non-judicial foreclosure, correct?
Non-judicial foreclosure. It does not have to be reviewed by a judge. There are people whose houses has been sold on the courthouse steps for dollars, and then they don't know until the next resident knocks on the door and says, "Get out."
Wow.
And there's no legal recourse.
That's unconscionable. I don't know how the legislature or the governor of that state or the attorney generals allow that to happen. I really don't.
Puzzling, and it seems like there's a lot of buck passing, and this isn't just Georgia, it's all over the nation. So I'm actually very proud of our legislators for currently trying to make things happen, but of course it's a difficult process simply because of the time it takes. You have to convince people, you have to write the legislature, so it's very hard to keep up with, but they are currently trying, and they're also trying to make everybody happy, try to find compromise, of course, and that's difficult.
Yeah. Well, you had brought to our attention two syndromes,
Mm,
which we had not heard about, the HOA syndrome,
mhm.
and the other one was
Legal
the other one?
abuse
The
syndrome.
legal abuse syndrome. So could you go over those briefly to kind of tell us what they're about? Because Mark and I had not heard about them before.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I actually give credit to my fellow advocate, Caroline, who studied with Dr. Karen Huffer, who wrote the book Legal Abuse Syndrome. And I recommend it to anybody and everybody who is in an HOA, and especially if they're experiencing the trauma involved with these high stress situations with mental and physical, I'm not sorry, mental and emotional abuse. And yet some people do experience physical abuse. I was talking to a man who his HOA president comes up and physically pushes him when he's
Wow.
out working with his property or whatever. So this is an untenable situation, and most people are very nice and don't want to get into violence or torture, whatever it is, mental torture. So legal abuse syndrome is when the legal system is used to your disadvantage. It's manipulated or your rights are taken from you on a technicality, or the other side has an attorney that's just really good at finding loopholes. And so you are caught in this system and you're trying to use the legal system to fight for your rights. And all it's doing is draining your time, your energy, and your money. And you're still losing, even though on paper your rights are there, or you have a valid argument. It's just being used against you, and the system is being used in your to disadvantage you. And then HOA syndrome was presented by Dr. Gary Solomon. There's not a book, but there is a paper that he wrote, and it's a subset of legal abuse syndrome, in which it's a specialized kind of legal abuse syndrome and PTSD, in which the living in a authoritarian or totalitarian environment in which there is the really good chance that on a whim somebody can destroy your life, and or you're always worried about harassment. You're living in a police state, so that car that's driving by, oh crud, am I going to get some sort of nonsense fine over who knows what that they decide to invent. And so it's the stress of constantly living under surveillance, and a situation like that that has no legal recourse if those in charge decide to become abusive. So this is all under the umbrella of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I always make the joke, it's never post because it never ends. So it's traumatic stress disorder. Legal abuse syndrome is a kind of PTSD or TSD, and then HOA is a subset of that.
What was interesting was that when we spoke the first time, Mark and I each came up with a classic psychological experiment that we took in school, that we read about in school. One was the Stanford Prison Experiment, and the other one was the Milgram Shock Experiment, which fall exactly in line with these other two theories that you're talking about, in which like Milgram, actually, I think Milgram did this right after the Eichmann trial in Israel to see whether or not people would follow authoritarian orders, whether they're moral or not, and he wasn't sure. And what he found was, yes, indeed, that people would. And the Stanford prison experiment, that was just crazy, because that was supposed to last 2 weeks, and that actually was cut short because the abuse was just so intense. So let's talk about what people, and I have to say that I know that a lot of people that are targeted within my community don't talk. They kind of pull back. I know that they have anxiety and stress and other things, but they think that they're isolated. They think that they're different because the boards try to marginalize these people. They tell the community, these people are troublemakers. They don't know what they're talking about. And so the community either withdraws or they join in and become bullies as well. So what are the common symptoms that we see throughout these studies? What are people actually experiencing aside from the PTSD? I know stress is one.
Oh, absolutely. Stress, anxiety, depression, physical exhaustion, your personality changes. You get angry at your children, your spouse, your family, isolationism, feelings of guilt. And it bleeds into all aspects of your life. I mean, sadly, I think most viewers can identify with a highly stressful time of their life. And so, yeah, you'll be familiar with the fact of anxiety is detrimental, and it can have permanent effects. Insomnia is another one. You're always jumpy. You're afraid to go out. Some people they will close their blinds and not let the light in, and if anybody drives by, they're terrified. They have nightmares and they worry about their pets and their children, and well, they should, because there's plenty of stories, pets being poisoned or taken, children being harassed and followed, and all those sorts of things. So it's not really a paranoia, because it's entirely possible. And of course, that is the psychological torment that some certain people, I always throw in the caveat that this is not, what I'm talking about is not every single HOA, it's abusive HOAs when I talk about things, because there are people who can manage well, and there are communities that are perfectly happy, and that's wonderful. But yes, these abusers, it really does, you're right, it goes into a very interesting place in the human psyche when there's such an imbalance of the power dynamic between the one that is dominant and the ones that are supposed to be submissive. And they always say that, HOAs are democratic. If the neighbors don't like it, they can vote them out and put somebody else in, and it either doesn't work out that well. It doesn't work out that way. The elections are rigged. People are threatened. People don't show up. They don't like the confrontation, or they're afraid they're going to be targeted, as you spoke of. So it is a horrible imbalance of power. And speaking objectively, yeah, it is like a giant Stanford Prison Experiment. There are masses of papers to be written, and it would be nice to do a national survey, but I don't know how that could possibly happen. But it would be interesting to get the data, which is something I intend to do in the future.
Wow, that would be great. So technically what they do is they put the member, the targeted member, into a state of fight or flight, which you can't sustain for a long period of time, because the cortisol level goes up. It's absolutely, yeah. So your body starts to break down. So technically, and Mark and I were talking about this, I think that there should be a hazard sticker applied to all governing documents before anyone signs on, because this stuff does happen, constantly.
Yeah, and to add to that, misapplied coping mechanisms. You're right. There's fight or flight or freeze. And of course, freeze is when you just curl up in bed, right? Depression, all that. But also, people abuse alcohol and drugs, and they can't get out of that cycle, because there is no, I do recommend therapy. I really do. Talk to your doctor if you're in any kind of distressful situation. And I am so sorry, because I know that it is inescapable and how hard it is to try to cope with it. But if there's some way that you can find healthy ways of dealing with the stress of moving forward or taking some action. Resident Evil is my therapy. It's my way of doing something, of fighting back. And of course, we need all the advocates we can get. So if you feel like you want to do something, I have at least 2 or 3 advocacy groups that I can recommend that you can contribute to. And I recommend all of them. And even just if it's just a few minutes a day, or if you just write letters to legislators saying we need help, it does something. And even if you're not directly fighting your own group, it is a way to try to build this momentum that I and your group is trying to build.
Yeah, the whole idea is to really raise awareness. And to let people know that we have to come together, because what they do to your neighbor today, they're going to do to you tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned well, it's going into even animal psychology. There's a lot of gray matter stuff. If you're a predator, what do? You single out the weak one and take it down, and the others will fall into line. It's very simple. And we are a gregarious being. We rely on society for our cues, for our behaviors, for protection. So it's hardwired into us that we need each other. And if there is a abusive situation, you're going to react accordingly. And that's where you get either the stress responses that you mentioned from the Stanford Prison Experiment and Milgram, where they did what they were told because in your brain, you don't want to be ostracized, and or
Right.
you don't want that to happen to you. And abusive people, not even really consciously, there's not a book on how to be a jerk. It's something in their psyche that they
Right.
know they're manipulative. I speak in my third lecture on narcissistic personality disorder, and it's amazing what these people are capable of, and they fully feel they are justified. And I believe that's part of the problem with this whole thing. And I did want to, before I forget, we can tie in the idea of Stockholm syndrome, because
Huh?
that's
Yes.
Yeah.
That's,
what
yeah, we forgot
happens.
that one.
There's so many out there, aren't there? We have to do a
Right.
series on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Stockholm
But the,
syndrome is where you identify with your captors. So somebody's
correct.
held you hostage, and
Yeah,
then and this happened a lot. I know it was named Stockholm, but it happened a lot to American prisoners of war in Vietnam as well,
yeah,
as I recall.
yeah.
that's a
It's
way
from
to, yeah. No, no, that's a way to survive.
yep,
I think as animals, and you're right, we are group animals. The idea of being ostracized out of the group, we would have died, hundreds
yes.
of thousands of years ago if we weren't part of the group because we survived as a group. So that's still in our animal brain, but it's terrible what I see going on here. It really is.
Yeah, and it is again a lot of again objectively fascinating, because you're right, we still rely on a lot of basic instincts and survival. Well, and if you think of it, if at a certain point, if you're sick or you get something, you're elderly, whatever, if you don't have people around you, you will die. It's just a
Right.
fact of life. Or children, of course, they're more vulnerable. We need each other for survival. And
Right.
so, whichever group or person has that power dynamic, the leadership, whatever that is going to be the protector. So that's where that kicks in, where it's, well, I guess this is the way it is because they're in charge. And if I don't follow, I will be eradicated. So they do, again, the Stockholm syndrome was from, I believe it was bank heist, and they did a study based on that and report on it, of course, and coin the term. Yes, they develop positive feelings with their captors or abusers due to prolonged stress and a need to survive.
Yeah.
So if you're seeing your neighbors losing their homes, being harassed, you don't want any part of that. I've
Right.
actually laid low as I'm working with Resident Evil and legislators, so that my group doesn't really know what's going on, because who knows? And unfortunately, with HOAs, you have to take the assumption that they're you have to protect yourself and assume that they're going to do what they can to protect themselves first. It is always good to try to talk to people. It is always good to try to do the diplomatic thing. But I've heard stories and I have experienced that that's may not be the case. So be prepared to be resisted and violently.
Really. Wow.
One other thing popped into my mind, and that's the concept of learned helplessness. So as you were
Yeah.
talking, yeah, yeah. So as you're talking about the Stockholm syndrome, so there's a lot of psychological principles, and it's not on our list of questions that we thought of in advance. But one of the thoughts that I have is to what extent are property management companies and the law
Mm.
firms that advise the boards responsible for the types of behavior that these boards, are guilty of.
Well, if you're a leader becomes a general with an army.
Hmm.
So if you have an army of folks who are willing to do what it takes, whatever that is, um, yeah, you have more strength and more people are going to be afraid of you. So of course, most people respect the law. Everyday people, of course, we respect the law. We are a democracy, and we know that those laws are in place, and we all respect it. Now, that being said, if these HOAs, of course, they may not follow their own laws, they may not follow the state law, they may not follow federal law. They do
Correct.
have
Correct.
lip service to the Constitution, state and federal, and laws in their CCNRs, but And then if you try to challenge that, of course, the legal system is set up. It's very interesting. A fellow advocate explained it as a turducken, where you peel away one layer, there's a whole nother animal, and then you peel away another layer, there's a whole nother animal. So we're going into you can go into the law aspect of it, where don't think that your HOA lawyer is on your side. They are not. They will protect
they're
your
not.
they will
Yeah.
not protect you at all. They will drain your finances until you go away, either because you give up or because you have no money left and have to sell your house. And so when you get into property management companies, they're a company, they're for profit. So although your HOA is not for profit or nonprofit, the property management company is. So it behooves them to drive around and find violations. And of course, there are systems set up with pyramid fees and delayed payment registering and all these sorts of horror stories, awful stories, people paying thousands of dollars for having a bird feeder in the wrong place, things like that. So those are set up. And then there is a lobbying organization, the Community Associations Institute, which I hear not many good things from advocates. I have not studied enough or know enough about it to say, but it has the opportunity to make things better for homeowners. But I do not, to my understanding, it's more about keeping the industry going, if that's what's actually happening. Now, again, we could have a whole other conversation about that. And I do encourage you, reach out to somebody who does know more about it, who can inform
We did
you.
an episode. Yeah, we did an episode on that. We had Deborah Goonan do that
Deborah,
for us.
yeah, that was a
Yeah.
great episode. I loved all your episodes, by the way, so I'm so proud to be here.
Yeah, no, you're great. We're trying to educate, people who are in common interest communities, because they really don't know what's going on, not just in their, they hear stories and they say, well, that happened somewhere else, but not here. It happens everywhere. And we want people to understand the plethora of pain and complaints. They're happening all across the country. It's not just in Florida where we're based, but it's, from what we've learned, the special interests, which are the association attorneys and the property managers and CAI, they're all there to maintain. They want to make sure that the feeding trough stays there for them, because they make money on us. And they're not interested in the rights of the property owners at all. And we're trying to change that. So I hope we'll be able to, in conjunction with you and other advocates, to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as an educator, that's my strength. So my main goal is for education. And again, I'm working on it as fast as I can, along with a full-time job and all the other things going on in life. But as we kind of mentioned earlier, everybody has a skill or knowledge. The last podcast you had with the law enforcement person, that was wonderful. I was wishing there was somebody like that here in Georgia. But we're all moving together, and I'm really proud of people for that, because that is something that is truly American. And it's something where we can stand up and say, no, this is not okay. And I know it's a David and Goliath thing, but really it must be done, because
absolutely
individuals are more important. We all need to be on the same level playing field. Legislators live in HOAs, lawyers live in HOAs, the insurance company people, they all live in HOAs. So there's got to be some way to level that playing field to make it fair for everybody.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. Property owners, the best way to stand up for your rights is to become a member of USCFAR. Visit us at www.uscfar.com now.
Now, you had mentioned you have a lecture series, and you had mentioned once before that when people get on the board, they go one way or the other. They either rule with compassion, I think you'd mentioned, or they rule with an iron fist.
Yeah. Or sometimes some people get stuck in between.
Okay, could you kind of tell us what that means, what you've noticed?
Yeah, it is interesting, because it's the human mind does tend to think in a binary. So black and white, cat, dog, tastes great, less filling, good, bad, right? So it's either HOA board or us. Well, sometimes the HOA board, there's members that are taking as much crap as the homeowners, and they're being
Right.
threatened and coerced, and
Mhm.
they're trying to do good on the board, but they're being ignored, or they're being, who knows what's actually going on, right? And they're afraid of getting fines, made up fines, if they say something, all those sorts of things. So again, this is in abusive groups. Now, if you have a healthy group, sure, everybody has a voice. They listen and either give you a reason for not doing it, find a compromise, or say, okay, let's have a vote on it, or let's go ahead and do it, whatever it is, the way it should be run. But in
Mhm.
the abusive situations, it is a power grab, and there is that tendency. And as you're speaking about with the Stanford Prison Experiment, so the prison experiment is the tendency for the human psyche to exert power over others when given that power, especially with no oversight and no
Yes.
accountability. And that's what we're looking at with HOAs. The Milgram is compliance. So those are the victims or the people that see what's going on, and they're being ordered by that person that's in charge. And again, they don't want to be ostracized or punished. So they do what they have to do because it's not on them. I didn't actually do it. It's finger pointing, right? That
Right.
he made me do it. She made me do it.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so it's not really
Policymaker
me.
said, the lawyer said. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it goes around and around and around. So that's kind of what's happening. And also there's this idea that when somebody is, they really, they want to do good things. A lot of HOA boards, they'll reach out, board members, they'll reach out and they'll say, this is such a difficult position to be in because there's people pissed off at me and the board is putting me in the middle, or it's just all these dynamics that are in place, and they want to do the right thing by being on the board. And they think that because there's this list of rules, you just point to the rules and there you are, it solves itself. But it does not happen that way, especially when you're in an abusive situation. So it just takes one really bad board member that's in charge, and they can get other people to even vote out people who work that challenge them or question them, get their buddies on the board with them. Then they go,
Mhm.
oh, well, we're going to either rig the election, not have elections, have secret elections, and just do what they want to do. So it's a poison that can spread. And it's important for homeowners to be diligent.
Yeah, what you said about no oversight, that's absolutely what the case is. When you have a bad board, you're right, there are good people that volunteer their time and they're much appreciated, but it's the ones that abuse their position. I have, in my community, we have 5 people on the board. They're homogeneous because they've all been on the board for like the last 5 years. One person is actually a sociopath or maybe a psychopath at this point because he's actually taken a swing at somebody. It was, yeah. So he shouldn't be on the board at all. But the rest of them somehow have adapted to him,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the problem. It's like this group think.
Yeah.
And we're very, as animals, as social animals, we're very susceptible to that unless we
Absolutely.
have a high moral standard, which for some reason I don't know what's happened to this country. I really don't, because it's like, where has all the morality gone?
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm smiling because these are, it's something where, of course, again, as an educator, I see life through that lens. And I've seen through uh, education really is we're focused more on testing and getting funds than we are on actually educating our youth. And of course, there are many ways to get your moral and ethical education. I know some people will point to religion, which is fine, but there's also, they've taken philosophy out of curriculum. They've taken ethics itself out of
Hey,
curriculum.
I didn't
All
know
these
that.
civics, all those sorts of things. It depends on the state, depends on the school, depends on the teacher.
Right.
Critical thinking. I'm actually
Yeah.
teaching at a freshman university level. I'm teaching some students the very first time about critical thinking and analysis of sources and questioning things. So I think that, I mean, there's a lot of issues that we're facing as a society, which societies always do, but they're all dovetailed with each other. So being able to support one another, have a good education system, and then that ties into a good civic presence with people, and they're good workers, they're good parts of the community, and they do have those focuses. So as things have been sheared down, we don't study the ethicists, we don't study the philosophers, and it's just about what, and of course it's always good to know what you need to know in order to be successful in your career, but they're cutting out that part of the humanities and just it's playtime. Arts and humanities are playtime, but they have a crucial function in society and our psychology. Of course, I say that as someone who's based in the humanities, so of course I have it's an informed opinion, I'll say.
Sure.
But I do think that is part of it, is that people need to be educated constantly in what is ethical, and present these questions. What is the good? What is the greater good? Is it the individual's rights or the group, right? Where do we find that balance? And those are fun things to talk about if you have an educated group of people that know how to have that conversation. Otherwise it becomes, screw you, I'm for this, and screw you, I'm for that, and then it
seems to be the
becomes,
state of political debate in our country right about now as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
No,
definitely.
you're absolutely right about that. And I had gone to one meeting with this was a couple of years back, where the board was talking about a special assessment. And I'm in a 55 plus community, which is not doesn't have the bells and whistles. It's a very moderate 55 plus community. And we actually had some neighbors get up and plead with the board not to put in any additional assessments in, because we had already had some, because they couldn't afford it.
Mhm.
And the stories were heartbreaking. And afterward, and of course, the board didn't pay any attention and they went ahead with it. So I don't know what happened to those neighbors, but at a later date, I had a chance to talk to a neighbor and I said to her, didn't you feel bad for the neighbors that couldn't afford the additional assessments? Thinking, well, maybe she'd reach down and find that humanity in herself. And she, kind of turned around and said, no, I didn't feel bad at all.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew the whole idea of love thy neighbor was gone,
Yeah.
totally gone. People
Yeah.
don't care anymore.
Yeah, it is interesting when a society is under duress. There's a lot of extra stress in the world, which we have as Americans. I mean,
Yes.
post 9/11 has been a big thing, right? And then, of
Yes.
course, the rise of digital media and phones and all that sort of thing. Plus, then we went through COVID, not to mention all the other stuff. We're under a lot of stress right now, and we are actually programmed to be anxious. If you think about how many times your thinking is constantly interrupted by something or this, that, or the other, sensationalist news, and oh my gosh, you must read this immediately. It's no wonder we are strung out as a society. And there is actually a book that came out. It was about the anxious generation of the new generation that's coming up that I'm meeting with now in the freshman years, how they don't know how to deal with all the stress in our life. And so when you have all that stress, you think less of other people. It becomes survival. And of course, we have to give ourselves that grace. But at the same time, when everybody's thinking about themselves, there's no time to build community or to help other people, or you don't feel you have the resources or the energy to, because you're also, again, avoiding that happening to you somehow, right? So I think that is part of it. We're under a lot of stress, and it's happened over and over through history where civilizations can collapse from that sort of stress, be it environmental or wars or disease, whatever it is. It's fascinating because the patterns are there. And so the question is, I think the stress that HOAs add to everything else, point, especially with the fact that they're becoming so much more corporate, the management companies are taking over. I've heard of neighborhoods that don't even have an HOA really. They just have this property management company that patrols the place. And nobody
Mm.
stops to think and say, wait a second, what the heck? So
Mm.
there's not a lot of questioning. We always have to question what is in place. Is it still serving its purpose? What harm is it causing? Is the good that it causes more than the harm that it causes? How do we alleviate the harm?
And like,
And
and where does it go to its logical conclusion? Like
exactly.
my theory is that this was set up to take away property rights, and that
Hmm.
HOAs, common interest communities in general, are a vehicle to do that legally. Obviously, they can do that in Georgia. They do it on a case by case basis, as we were talking about the foreclosure on the courthouse steps for $2,000 and fines for maybe a birdhouse, which is absolutely crazy. But I do think that it's a setup on the massive scale, so that we will own nothing and like it, as they like to say.
I lost your audio and then I lost
Oh,
you. Okay, I'm
I'm
back.
here.
I'm so sorry.
You missed my my great soapbox
It
speech.
was so great. I could see the passion.
Fired up.
Okay.
Anne, could you still hear him? I'm trying to figure out if it
Yes.
was me.
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No,
No, that's okay.
it's perfectly fine. I was just talking about that. If you take it to its logical conclusion, I believe that the HOAs, or common interest communities in general, have been designed as a trap, and the
Mm.
trap is ultimately to take away our property rights. And if you do take this, forward 10, 20 years, it seems inevitable unless we make a change. So, and then I mentioned the very well-known phrase by a group called the World Economic Forum, which is "You'll own nothing and like it." And
Yeah.
I believe that that's the path that they have 75 million plus Americans on right now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it is fascinating because again, it's that turducken of stuff.
Mm.
Um, right at the same time as this was coming up in my life, also the idea that all these homes are being bought by corporations and then being rented out for
Yes.
astronomical
Yep.
amounts, and it's one of the causes of the housing crisis. And I also
Housing
think
shortage. Yes.
absolutely. And then the HOAs do not help because, the assessments are coming in and they're constantly raising their yearly fees, which of course is part of the whole economic system and so forth. But really, it's at what point, again, do the benefits outweigh the negatives? What are you getting for your
Lawn
$500,000, $2,000,
maintenance,
$3,000?
lawn maintenance, a
Yeah,
gate.
exactly. Exactly. And all because, again, it's these ridiculous things of how high your grass must be or else you get fined. There's a lady that in Georgia here, we have pine straw as part of a kind of a mulchy kind of thing. Her pine straw wasn't fluffy enough
Hmm.
and she
Really?
was fined. Oh, yeah. And it's just, and of course, those of us that work, and most of us do, or retired or have lives, you can't keep up with the lawn exactly that way sometimes. So there's
Right.
this thing where how much money is being made by all these landscaping companies, not that they don't work hard, but it's an industry that just generates money for the sake of generating money, and it's all coming out of the homeowners' pockets. And we're told that our property values are increased, which there's
Not true.
recent studies that show that it's not really that true, or even if it is true, it's only like $1,000 or
Yep.
$10,000, depending on the neighborhood and all that sort of thing. But for the aggravation of living in a police state
Mhm.
and being under threat and possibly losing your home for no good reason, that's
Yeah.
not worth it to me. And I also like individuality. Since the group in our neighborhood does not have jurisdiction over our properties, it's cool to see these different little flares of personality. And those of you that, the argument's usually, well, there's going to be cars on blocks in the yard in 2 weeks. No, people do want to keep up, generally want to keep up their property because they do know that if it looks nice, it does increase property value. If you have a negligent neighbor, that's what code enforcement is for. And if you personally don't like the way your neighbor's house looks, well, that's their right to have their house like that, within reason, of course. just as it's your right to have your house look immaculate.
You know what I find interesting? The CICs, when they started out, were not that bad.
Mhm.
But as it's progressed, we all know it's gotten much worse. But it's almost as if they've taken this alien form and dropped it on us, because as Americans, we don't believe in collectivism. But this type of housing is collective housing, where
Yeah.
everyone has to conform. We are rugged individuals. And that's why you have people bristling in these communities and saying, those rules and regulations don't work for us.
Yeah.
And so I think ultimately the system will fail because more and more people are speaking up. And you're right. When does the good outweigh the bad? I think we've taken that. We've gotten to
Already past that point.
we've
Yeah.
already
yeah.
passed that point.
Where the bad has outweighed the good.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Now
Right.
it's
And
a question of
unfortunately,
just
though, I
now
was
it's a
going to say,
question of just getting
unfortunately,
the numbers.
yeah, that, and also, it's at a point where the structures that were put in place to keep this cash cow flowing are so strong that
Yes.
it's hard for people to fight individually, which is why it's
Right.
so important for all of us to come together, to reach out to our legislators, to really make sure that they create legislation that causes a balance of power, that
Yeah.
causes accountability for these people. So there's currently a bill in Georgia where it's allowing the Secretary of State to take complaints and treat them as corporations, because that's another problem, is that the law, they're named as corporations, they're registered as corporations, but they're private clubs, which is what they were formed to be in the first place. As suburbia grew, so as urban centers got denser, there was a migration of people away from the cities, and they did not want certain people in their neighborhoods. And so as private groups, they were able to write in that you could not have XYZ kind of people. And it's evolved from there. They've, of course, taken that out, but there's still ways to keep out or eradicate people that do not conform to what they want, which is fascinating. And you're right, it is offensive to us as Americans that somebody has this right to tell us what we can and cannot do with minutia of our property. Again, you do have to be respectful and not be obnoxious.
Right.
But it does speak to that idea that I discuss it in my third lecture, the political spectrum. Again, binaries, we're used to binaries. So if you think about it, politics or anything, ideology on a spectrum, there are in-betweens. It's not just hardcore conservative and hardcore liberal. There's Republican, Democrat, moderates, independents, and all that. And then in the graph that I show, it actually widens it into a square where you can go towards less control, and it turns into, if it goes too far, it goes into anarchy. And then more control on either side, which is what you're pointing to, is either communism, red communism on the left, and fascism on the right, if it goes too far. And they actually sort of come together and become the same thing.
Yeah, so if you go around the circle, they actually join. There's no right or left. It's collectivism or individualism. That's what it is. It's just misrepresented.
Absolutely. And of course, because we don't really understand it all that much, it's complicated. And I would actually suggest that we could envision that graph as a sphere, because you're right, the extremes come together into this mess of just complete domination.
Yeah. Well, you know what I find interesting is that the idea was, they sold people on the common interest communities because the property values would go up, and, you wouldn't have that pink house. Everybody would be a little bit more uniform. So they went from managing property, and now they're managing people. And that's the problem, because they've gone too far. Because when they can tell you who can live in your house, and who can do other things, that really imposes on us. And I don't like that. I don't think a lot of people like that.
This is absolutely a bipartisan issue. I mean, there's a lot of divide right now, but, and of course, maybe I'm just being a little naive or too, go USA, all that sort of thing. But I believe we can find common ground in personal freedoms and independence
Right.
and,
Right.
you know, being able to respect others, but have others respect you back, and then find that common
Absolutely.
ground and be able to rely on actual government authorities. You mentioned earlier that people, it grates against them and they bristle against these HOAs. Well, it's because it's just your neighbors telling you what to do. It's not an actual government authority. It's not really a legal authority. They make their own rules and they play their own game. And yeah, that is going to grate against red, white, and blue blood, as well it should.
Actually, it's a corporate authority when you think about it, because
Yeah.
you're
Yeah, it really is.
signing an agreement to a corporate contract, essentially.
And that's another problem that you were sort of hinting at before regarding education. When we signed on, we were not given any paperwork whatsoever. We did not receive any CC&Rs. And when I asked the attorney about it, he said, "Oh, you'll have to ask them," and made it seem like it was just a matter of course that, oh, once you're in, just ask. And so again, we were trapped into this. And I have a feeling there was some shady stuff going on. It just
Right.
was a little too bizarre. And of course, when you're house shopping, it is not fun whatsoever. So, but
Right.
it's
Right.
education. And again, that's what I want to try to get out there. One of my main projects that I'm trying to work on right now, among many, is to get the word out to home buyers, especially young home buyers that have no idea that this exists, what they're actually getting into. Demand those documents, have your
Right.
attorney look it over. And some of these documents are 400 pages long in legalese.
Yes.
I have a PhD and it's based in literature. I can't understand half of this stuff. So you need to rely on these professionals to do it, which of course generates more money. But at the same time, it should be readable by somebody with a US education. It should be understood and
Absolutely.
not be that complicated.
Right.
Especially
Absolutely.
again, when it's dealing with your personal rights and your personal property. Your home is sacred. It is a sacred spot, and we should all respect each other's homes equally in that respect.
Hmm.
And it's usually your biggest investment. So you're
Absolutely.
actually risking your largest investment. This is how Americans build wealth, is by buying property. So
Yeah.
you're risking, your liberty and your biggest investment on something you don't understand. And we just recently interviewed an attorney who told us that yes, the CC&Rs can go up to 400 pages. And if you're out buying a house and you have a time limit, how are you going to read it?
You don't, and even understand it or question it. Again, we
And
didn't see.
even if you can read it, it's
Yeah,
so much is subject to interpretation by the person that's
absolutely.
enforcing.
Right.
Absolutely. No, there's plenty of disputes I've heard about where even, architectural things are a big thing, right? So they go through the process, they get the approval, blah, blah, blah. They put in whatever it is according to specs, and somebody in the board thinks it's tacky. So they make the person take it down. Then there's a lawsuit that ensues, and the courts don't want to deal with it. They consider it a civil matter. The civil court
Yes.
considers it to be a corporate matter. And then if it's actually criminal, you really have to prove that it's criminal, and that just launches it into another. And most people run out of money and and
Yes.
time and energy, and they're just like, oh, forget it.
Right.
And that's
Right.
just not the way it should be.
Well, we agree with you completely. So, does anyone, based on your experience, do people have any legal rights that they can use when you have an abusive board coming after you? Is there something that they can do without having to sue them, which costs a lot of monit?
My short answer is no,
Okay.
because
So,
I mean, there are things you can do. But it is tough, as I found in my own experience. What you can do is educate yourself on what your CC&Rs say. Educate yourself on your state law. There should be code
right.
regarding associations. Um, and I actually have a lecture in which I show people how to do that, how to find it on their General Assembly site, what the language looks like, how to navigate it, what CC&Rs look like, and what to ask for, because sometimes people ask for things and they just get a memo. They don't actually get the legal documents. How to navigate to go to, say, the county clerk and get the documents from them, or the Secretary of State, that sort of thing. So educate yourself on what you are actually bound to, first of all. Next off, get the neighbors together, because there should be, once you read your CCNRs, there should be clauses in there about removal, elections, that sort of thing. So what you can do is, and I know it's a lot of legwork that most people don't have time for, I being one of them, to get everybody involved, you can get a petition going to remove a board. You can recall a board. I've had a few people go through that process and it works. But then you have to work with the attorneys and redo your CCNRs. You have to have elections to vote on changes and that sort of thing. But that's something you can do. And if you have the time and stamina to get yourself and other supporters on the board to clean it up, you can. If you don't, hopefully you could try to find somebody who, a group of people who'd be willing to do that. And there's been a few times when the neighbors get together. There was a instance down south of Atlanta where a board was attempting to charge each person in the neighborhood, believe it was $28,000 each, to replace a dam that was failing that would only benefit the people on the water. And guess who lived on the water? People on the HOA board. And
Of course.
Of course. And so they were trying to make the other neighbors pay for upgrades to their land and all that. And of course, it's a ridiculous amount of money, which, by the way, the maintenance had not been done by that board preceding board. There were no reserves, all the usual mess. And they wanted to force them into that. So the neighbors, to my understanding, the neighbors got together and petitioned to dissolve the board.
Really? Good.
Yeah,
Good
so
for them.
I'm not sure where they're at with that, because they did remove the people that were doing all kinds of crazy things, like signing an engineering contract without anybody else knowing, not having the authority, etc. All kinds of stuff was going on, but I believe they were able to remove that board. They have somebody else in place, and I think they were working on dissolving.
Okay, so I understand the whole idea about getting to, there's always power in numbers. That's one of our lines. But if you're targeted by a board, have you heard of anything where people can kind of work their way out of issues without supportive neighbors? Because that happens a lot too.
It does, because as we've talked before, people don't want to be targeted themselves. And there's some people that will actually say, well, you asked for it, which is baffling to me.
Right.
Really, you can check with local law enforcement, but they're often hesitant to get involved with these things. Again, they consider it a civil matter.
That's what they say. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's something where if they actually do something that could be considered, criminal assault, vandalism, things like that, you can try to get the law enforcement involved. I haven't heard, sometimes there's successes, sometimes not. It just depends. I mean, sometimes you can get restraining orders, but what is that going to do? Because they're still part of the board, and the board is what does things rather than a person. So if there's a person, you can try to stand up with the law for a person, but if it's just this ambiguous board, I don't know of any success stories, and I'd love to hear of some. I hope maybe somebody listening can share some ideas, but for the most part, be prepared for a loss.
Yeah. Well, if anyone out there has any stories or can shed any light on anything that works, please let us know, because we're always looking for solutions.
Go to uscfar.com. We do have a form on the homepage. If you could share with us there, or just send us an email, either way.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. The Association Nightmares podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Coalition for Association Reform. USCFAR is committed to changing how associations are governed by shifting the balance of power to better safeguard and advance the rights of individual property owners. The best way to stand up for your property rights is to become a member of USCFAR. Visit us at www.uscfar.com now.
We were talking about the CCNRs, and Mark had talked about this earlier because he used to be a stockbroker many, many years ago. And I really think that the CCNRs really need to be done in everyday English, everyday common language, because it's a contract. And people really should be able to read it. If the industry says, did you read your CCNRs before you
Mhm.
signed the deal to move in? Well, it should be, people should be able to understand what they're reading. You're absolutely right on that. So maybe what we need to do is, and I know that it's legislation is state specific, so we'd have to work in our own individual states, but maybe we need to do a national push to make the CCNRs written in everyday language, because we're the end users.
Well, there is a group, the Home HOA Reform Leaders National Group, that has a list of proposed legislation, and part of
Mhm.
it is having everyday, understandable, plain English in CCNRs. They actually have, I did help try to organize that a little bit a couple of years ago with them, and so I worked with it pretty closely. And the founder, Patrick, came up with all of uh, the ideas, and of course they're adding and changing as people come up with ideas and things
Right.
like that. So do check that out if you're interested,
Yeah, I've
dear
spoken to
listener.
Patrick a couple of times, but do you know if
Yeah.
they've taken that, have they taken that beyond just the idea stage? Have they tried to implement it?
Yeah, they do share it quite a bit with state legislators, especially when there's rumblings of getting bills created that
Yeah.
will affect HOA. So I know that they were working directly with several senators in our state who were
Mhm.
working on HOA bills last year and this year, and trying to help them come up with ideas for what can we offer that would actually solve these problems. Now, of
Right.
course, it's not going to happen where a legislator and then all the legislators go, yes, let's just adopt all this stuff, because
Right.
the industry
How it works, yeah.
stands up and they are very loud and they are very persistent. They have the time, they have the people, they have the money, and they have the clout. So CAI, for instance, will
Right.
definitely try to defend its interests. And of course, again, it's something where where's the good versus the bad. So it's hard to get across to legislators, and I know their job is tough because they have to try to make everybody happy and follow the law, because they actually are law-abiding authorities. So it's really tough. And then once you actually do get a bill or something that works or could work, you try to push it through. Well, you have to push it through your side of the assembly, then you have to push it through the other side, and then you have to get it past the governor.
Mm.
Oy. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's not
it's
easy.
tough. But then look at Florida. Unfortunately, it took a giant couple of ginormous catastrophes, and it has caused problems. But as I say in one of my blogs, it wasn't the change in the law that caused the problems. It's the negligence and the abuse that had been happening for decades that was finally called out that caused the problems.
You're talking about the
So
SB4D.
yeah,
You're
that
talking about the
was,
high-rise bill, high-rise
yep.
condominium. That's a whole other animal. A whole other animal.
It's a turducken. There's something goes past the duck. There's something else in there.
You see, the thing
Yeah,
is, you're right. It's like layers and layers. It's not just if it was just one problem. I
yeah,
think there are enough people who are smart enough to figure it out. There are layers and layers of issues, and that's what it is. It's become very complicated, and it shouldn't
absolutely.
be. It
No,
really
it
shouldn't be.
shouldn't. So I think, to come back around to your question, what can I do as an individual person? Again, you can join advocacy groups, you can reach out to legislators, educate yourself on what the laws are in your state, and be an advocate in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
I strongly recommend, and actually part of my project, once I send out a survey, and I'm building this, by the way, but my plan is, once I send out a survey to all the homeowners, get their feel for what their opinion is of the group and how legal they are, all that sort of thing. Then I share the report with the neighbors. So if
Hmm.
it comes back that 80% of people hate the HOA or how it's being run, the neighbors will go, oh, it's not just me.
Mhm.
And so then I offer, okay, how can we diplomatically, and I'll even, try to work as a liaison of sorts, or help people form a group that's a neighborhood coalition. So sort of like, you have the board, and then you have a group of neighbors that help to represent non-board members, and to kind of work together, try to get things worked out. And again, if you need to replace, make sure the elections are fair, and make sure
Mhm.
that everything is a proper outcome. And if they don't get replaced, we know it was a fair election, all that sort of thing, and just kind of help them advocate for themselves within their own neighborhood. So that's one of many, many things.
Great. So you sent out this survey within your community?
No, I have not done anything yet. I do
Okay.
have it up. I'm, I have to balance my life with teaching full time at a university
Okay.
and
Yeah.
the
And
HOA
doing
stuff.
this.
Yes, exactly. So, and I do want to make sure it's a good survey. I'm actually going through trying to make sure that it's well done, that it doesn't have any biases and so forth. Yeah, you mentioned
That's a great idea. That's really a
oh
great
yeah,
idea because our board does not survey the community.
Yeah, they
You
don't
know,
really
because
want
they're
people
afraid of
to see them.
what they'll
Yeah,
say.
but
yeah,
it would
yeah.
be very interesting to go to association boards and
Mhm.
make the survey available as a feedback mechanism that
Mhm.
they can use. But then the participants get their own, they get their own view of it as well. So it's not just the board that gets it; it's
Yeah.
shared, right?
Yeah, definitely. No, that's what I am planning to do is that I would send out cards with a QR and it goes to my site, has the survey. Everybody
Mhm.
can take it, and then I provide the results to everybody. And if they wish to pursue it on their own, great. If they want help forming a group, or need any information, I'd like to try to offer that. And then that way, again, it becomes a self-running democracy, really. And
That's a great idea. That's a really great idea, Amanda.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people don't realize again how ubiquitous these issues are, as you've said many times, that people think it's just them, it's just their neighborhood, that they're the only ones that are unhappy, that well, those are the rules, I guess it's me, or I just have to do it. No, you don't. You really don't. And speaking of ethics, you
Mhm.
mentioned the Milgram and Stanford.
Stanford.
As an academic, another reason it's taking me a little longer to carefully form this survey, I'm trained, and it's a very long training called the Internal Review Board. When you would do anything as an academic, even just a survey saying, hey, what do you think of the weather today? If I did it through my school as part of my project, which I'm absolutely independent of my school, but we have an intense training based off of the Belmont report that came from these that said, okay, we've got to put something in place to keep this from happening and protect people. And going through that training again, because you always have to do it, I'm thinking, why? Oh, why do these boards not have to go through something similar to
Mm.
be aware of what you can do, what you can't do, what's right, what's wrong, and be held to certain parameters? Because let me tell you, as soon as something happens, like there's something off, they will shut down your project immediately.
Mm.
And even though I'm not affiliated with the university in this work, I still hold myself to those standards because I do want it to
Mhm.
be fair. I do want the data to be correct. I don't want it to be skewed. Because I don't know, I guess I'm a perfectionist that way. And I want to be
Well,
fair.
you have a standard. You have a standard,
Yeah.
right? So, and that's a very interesting point as well. I think about, if HOA boards have to take, licensing here in
Yeah.
Florida. I'm sure it's the same in Georgia as well. And it's a 4-hour course. It's a very easy multiple choice test at the end. But there's really nothing about ethics. There's really nothing about treating
Yeah.
all of the neighbors equally and an application of the rules equally. There's nothing there that would help them to identify if, for example, like a real estate company was coming in and buying up units
Mm.
and was trying to get them on their side, or the property management company was trying to raise some fees by some nefarious practice. There's just nothing in there for them to, what should I watch out for, and what kind of risks and pitfalls could befall me in this position. So
Absolutely.
really, really interesting lack of that option for them.
Well, if you
The-
think about it, most of
sorry.
us go through extended training and
Yeah.
professional development in our fields to know what we can do, what we can't do, how to hold
Mhm.
that fairness, all those sorts of things. These
Hmm.
people are in charge of other people's finances and homes,
Yep.
and there is nothing that
Nothing.
they are trained or held to hold them accountable or to say, listen, if you do it this way, you're out. There's nothing like that.
Versus
And
somebody that's gets a role in a municipal government, for example, they have code and they have ethics and there's boards and there's oversight and so it's quite different. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah,
it baffles me that there's nothing in place.
Well, that's very interesting because the thing is that the boards are very well insulated and protected by the industry. And that's a problem because aside from training them, if the boards had personal liability, if they did something they shouldn't have done, that would make a huge difference because most HOAs and condos have an attorney of record. They contract with a law firm that's there. They can make a phone call for 10 minutes and get a legal opinion and ask a question because they're not attorneys, but they don't do that. They just kind of do what they want, hoping that they're going to get away with it. So again, accountability is an issue. It really is.
No, it absolutely is. And again, I think this is part of the reason in Privatopia, Professor Evan McKenzie talks about the idea that people don't recognize them as a viable or legal even entity, even though you have the documents and all that stuff. This is just my neighbor or that crazy person down the street that's got this weird obsession with blah, blah, blah. But they have the power to make them miserable. So they just ignore them. And for goodness sake, people, please don't stop paying your fees or anything like that just because you don't agree, because they will come after you and you can lose your house over that. So, and it's unfortunate because it does force you. You can't just not pay just because, even if you're in the right, because they will overcome you every single time.
Yeah, it's a perfect storm. It's set up to. It's like if you lift your head up, they'll come and they'll clobber you. So absolutely, I've used that term myself.
Those homeowners.
Yeah, they are just bop bop bop. And of course, as corporations are coming into these neighborhoods, they're getting comfy and close to the boards and even getting on the boards and just taking over. And it is, unfortunately, we have legal systems and laws and rules in place as societies because you can't trust human nature. Unfortunately, it will look out for its best and own interests. And there are people that aren't on the up and up, and they will try to take it. It's a game to them. So we have to try to protect ourselves somehow from this behavior. And if it's established in every other facet of our society, why in the world is it not set up that way in our own neighborhoods to protect us from people who are not even, again, overseen legal, meaning government entities? They're not. It's not even a job. It's whoever volunteers, and usually whoever most people don't want to do it. Or if they do want to do it, they want to do a really good job.
So, or they've got some ulterior motive.
Sure.
It could be that they've got a brother-in-law with a landscaping company, or
absolutely
whatever it might be. They're a little grift that they want to put in.
Oh, sure. Collusion is absolutely a problem, and of course that comes into getting into criminal, but you've got to prove it, and that's so hard to do. It really is
very, very hard to do.
Yeah. Your example from the last podcast, the law enforcement. Tamara, she's wonderful. She had that example of the thousands and thousands of dollars, like $42,000 a year in landscaping or something, and it just disappeared.
Or 90 something. Yeah. She's
absolutely
told some amazing stories.
No, that was incredible. And the thing is, most people are probably sitting there going, oh, well, that's an extreme example. That couldn't be happening, all over. Well, it's happening more often than you think. And it's so hard to stop it. You need people like Tamara. And most states, thank goodness I'm so happy for all the people in Florida that have her, but we do not have that in all 50 states. And that it's a volunteer organization that does that.
No,
they came up with it themselves.
Yeah.
And they get paid, but I mean, they volunteer. Like, we need to form this as a business instead of the
100%.
government going, we need this.
This is what I've said this to Tamara. I'm like, you've got to take what you've done in Florida and we've got to replicate it in other states. So
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
hopefully,
yes.
hopefully she will do that because
Yeah.
sorely.
Well, they're investigators. They know what to look for when they do a forensic audit, and it's very time consuming and it costs money. And usually a new board that's coming in will hire them because they suspect the previous board of embezzlement or whatever. And it happens a lot more than people know. It really
Oh,
does.
absolutely. And this actually answers one of your questions about, are these associations actually beneficial or not? And I would argue that, you know what, if you have a good one, maybe, they help to keep up the pool and the common grounds and things like that. But eventually it's going to change. And if you have a bad group, if the word gets out, your property value is going to plummet. I have a feeling that neighborhood I was talking about south of Atlanta you probably could not sell at all in that neighborhood unless the person had no idea what was going on. And of course, they always say, well, if you do these things, right, it costs the HOA and that costs the neighborhood. And that's true because it's not the HOA paying for it. You are the HOA.
Yeah,
you are going to pay for it. So if you have a bad board, you could get caught holding the ball on on years and years and years of neglect, of embezzlement, of collusion, of all these things. And then what is your homework?
Negligence or letting things that should have been maintained crumble, that sort of behavior. Yeah.
Or when you have a bad board that goes out and sues people and they're sued back. And it happens. And when they lose, who pays for that? I think someone told us, the insurance will cover certain cases, but there was one case where somebody won a lawsuit for discrimination.
Oh, yes.
$5 million. And the insurance company did not cover that, but the property owners were liable for it. So you have to watch what the boards are doing. That's a whole other thing. They should not be allowed to just take the checkbook and do what they want legally. They have to be watched.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
What do you suggest in that regard, Amanda? Like what kind of checks and balances and oversight would you like to see?
Frankly, I would just like to see the whole thing phased out and that the
Me too.
responsibility the responsibility go to code enforcement. And as far as like common property management, you can hire a company to do that sort of thing for you. And that's what property management companies do anyway. But stay in your lane. You can do common properties, pools, all the fun stuff that you have, but you cannot say what I can do with my house or not. And if there's a negligent neighbor that is gone across the line, call code enforcement. And if you're code enforcement, some people complain, well, they don't do enough. Well, you need to start griping at them and follow the process, because if you gripe to your board, it can be the same thing, or you can turn it into a hellacious situation. Some people don't realize that, maybe I'm in the wrong in this situation. They never think they are, as far as like when they're making accusations about what somebody should or should not be doing. Did you consider their rights and freedoms and respecting their property? So it becomes this whole thing where people just, these neighbor disputes become this neighborhood dispute, and it ends up costing everybody thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And before anybody gets lawsuit happy, be careful, because in my case, this happened. In my neighborhood, they do this. If they incur any lawyer's fees, they will charge you. Even if you win, you will get the HOAs. Otherwise, I would have had their sorry butts in court a long time ago. But being a teacher, I don't have that kind of bank account yet.
Well, that's part of their plan, is to keep you poor so you can't fight them.
Absolutely. And even if you had tons of money, you're fighting an entire firm of lawyers.
That's right.
That they've corporate lawyers. And their job, it's the lawyer's job, is to win the case. I can't really blame them. They have to fight for their client. They can't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, you're wrong."
As you said, they could just exhaust you procedurally. exhaust your resources, exhaust your time,
Yeah.
drag things out. They don't even have to win.
Yeah.
They don't even have to have a case that they can win. They just
Yeah.
have to be able to outlast you.
My
And
case
then, of
was never
course,
heard. My
yeah,
case was never heard. It was actually just punted out on a procedural grounds. Okay.
yeah, they can
So
do that. They can kick it to appeals. They can go
Mhm.
back and forth to different courts.
yes.
They can not show up in court and have to reschedule, or I've heard all kinds of crazy things.
Right. Right.
And of course, another layer is, the court system. Sometimes I've been
Oh,
hearing stories of, things getting punted or moved. There's judges that know people in the business and don't
Mhm.
find in favor of homeowners
yes.
ever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's sad.
Yeah.
It really is
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah. It's the reality. And that's what
Mm,
we're trying to teach people is what, when I went into court, I went in assuming that there was a justice system.
mm,
And a friend of mine said, there is no justice system. It's a legal system. Sometimes you
yeah.
get justice and sometimes you don't. Well, that's what I learned. I learned there is no justice system. Unfortunately, I don't know quite how to articulate it, but it's worse than going to Las Vegas, because in Las Vegas, you do win occasionally. But in this situation, the odds are really against you.
And
And
really,
that's
it's
why I
not
tell,
even odds. It has been manipulated for
yes,
probability to be
yes,
against you. So unless you have a really good lawyer that really knows the system, and unfortunately, most lawyers don't. And most people don't even know what kind of lawyer to go to. So they might go to a real estate lawyer. That's not
right,
HOA law per se,
right,
or
right,
contract lawyer. Maybe that's closer, but it's not HOA law. And so they get somebody that takes the case because, like, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. It's not their money.
Mm.
And
right,
then they don't know how to defend the
yeah,
case. Whereas the attorneys on the side of the board, this is common, just
yeah.
another day in paradise for them. And again, that's their job, that's what they're hired for, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, so
I just want
it's
to share something with you
hard.
that, no, sir, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just thought of it.
That's okay.
They just passed some legislation, and I just took a review class with a law firm. And there was a question about how is this new law going to be applied? And the attorney, who is an HOA association attorney, said, we don't know yet. We have to see how the courts are going to rule on it, and then we'll know how to apply it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the state legislatures write vague laws that nobody understands, and then you have to wait for case law to set it up. It's
Yeah.
crazy,
Yeah. The
totally
precedent
crazy.
system. Yeah,
Yeah,
and of course, there's all kinds of stuff that has to do with that. But yeah, you have to also, if you want to dig that deep, God bless you, look at what precedents are out there for cases that are similar to yours. I mean, really, that's what you pay attorneys to do is they know the system a little bit better, they know the basic laws and all that stuff. And so they send paralegals to go dig around and look for precedents that they can
right,
possibly argue to apply. And
right,
sometimes, someone sets a new precedent, but usually, again, it's usually not in the favor of the homeowner. And of course, that kind of baffles me because, again, I have this mighty ideal that, individuals, right, and what's good for an individual is good for everybody, including people that
right.
are part of bigger corporations. But corporations should not have precedence over individual people. But maybe
Mhm.
I'm
I'm
right there
just a
with you.
dreamer.
Right,
I
right there
don't
with
know.
you. Well,
It's idealism that
yes,
this nation was founded on, right?
Well, again, I had a lot
yes,
of education in the philosophy, political philosophy, and the founding fathers and their writings and all that sort of things. So, again, if you taught that sort of thing in school a little bit more, maybe everybody would understand it, or at least be able to have a conversation about it. But
Mm.
I don't know.
maybe we'll leave that for another segment.
We'll
Yeah,
need
there you
to.
go.
We'll need to because we're coming up on it right now.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh,
You have
Yes.
so
Thank
much
you so much.
information to share.
well, I'm very glad to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. As I say, I just want to try to help people. I don't know how much I can do, but every little bit that can help makes it all worth it. So I
Absolutely.
invite people to check out my program. And of course, I am still building it, but I'm at www.residentevilhoa.com. I hope to have merch soon. I hope to have surveys out soon. I hope to complete the lectures soon. Summertime, that's what teachers do in the summertime.
Well, we talked before, and we have a special T-shirt design that is something that we're sharing with Dr. Amanda. So it hasn't yet, at the time of recording, it's not on the website, but it's added. By the time you see this podcast, it will be on our website, and you could support her by going to USC and buying this t-shirt. Now, I'm gonna tell you what the t-shirt says. It's a combination of HOA and the word. It's very clever. I saw it and we talked about it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a perfect t-shirt. So thank you, Amanda. We're gonna, and as we said, we'll be sharing revenue on that so that you get additional support for the work that you're doing, which is wonderful. So I highly encourage everybody who's enjoyed the podcast today to go visit Amanda's website. It's really, if you want to take a deep dive and intellectually stimulated along the way, it's a great place to go.
Well, I do appreciate that. And really, if I'm sure you got people's attention when you said that word, because it always works with my students. And I don't use it to be blue. There are books on
Oh, that's great.
How to fight bullies, and they call it like it is. And
Yes,
so
they are.
I had a little fun. So Mark, I appreciate that I was able to inspire you. I actually came up with, I have a t-shirt in production, well, not production, but it's in design right now that has my logo and everything. And the first one's going to be Curb the Karens. So be on the lookout for a Curb the Karens t-shirt.
Nice.
Plenty of other fun things. And also I have a blog if you want to chime in. And I love hearing from people, ideas of what to write about, how to manage the stress, how to deal with this sort of thing. So reach out. I don't know how much I can help, but I do have connections to other people who can help you. So we can do this. Together we can do this is one of my slogans, along with democracy starts at home. So start fighting in your own
Absolutely.
territory, make it spread. We can do this, guys. We really can.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Great message.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful.
Likewise.
Yes, it has been. We'll be in touch.
We'll see you
Okay.
Is that how you do it?
My students do this. I have online classes, and this is how they tell me that they love the class.
It's wonderful. All right. Well, we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay.
Take care, honey. Take care. Bye-bye.